We don't talk about death because it scares us. We whisper it behind closed doors or dress it up in clinical terms and statistics so we don't have to face its realness. But the truth is, death isn't a punishment. It's not the final stamp on a life that either succeeded or failed. Death is a passage, a deeply human transition, the doorway between one way of being and another that we don't fully understand, but feel in our bones. For most of us, the thought of dying feels like a disruption, a terrifying full stop. But what if we saw it as a comma instead, a breath, a turning of the page? What if we recognize that our time here is not infinite, not guaranteed, and that this fact doesn't make life less meaningful, but more? We spend so much of our lives acting like we'll live forever, chasing perfection, holding grudges, fearing change, and all the while we're edging closer to that inevitable threshold. There's a moment that comes when we realize we're not in control the way we thought we were. Maybe it's a diagnosis, maybe it's the death of someone close, maybe it's just waking up one day and realizing you're not the person you used to be. These moments crack us open, not to break us, but to make space for truth, for acceptance, for preparation. Death is not out to get us. It's not lurking in the shadows to punish us for mistakes or imperfections. It's part of the design. And while we can't predict when or how it will come, we can decide how to meet it with awareness instead of avoidance, with reverence instead of resistance, with the kind of courage that comes not from strength, but from softness, from surrender. Recognizing that death is closer than we think is not about panic. It's about presence. It's about understanding that every interaction, every apology, every laugh, every goodbye might carry more weight than we realized. And instead of letting that crush us, we can let it carve out space in us, space for meaning, for connection, for preparing our souls, not in fear, but in love. There comes a time, for some gradually, for others all at once, when the things that once felt so urgent begin to loosen their grip. The noise of the world, the pressure to keep up, the need to prove yourself, the craving for more, it all starts to feel quieter. Not because you've given up, not because you're depressed or detached, but because your soul might be preparing for something deeper, something sacred. We live in a world that tells us to hold on, cling to success, cling to youth, cling to titles, roles, approval, and stuff. And for a long time, that seems like the way to live, to build, to accumulate, to become somebody. But when the soul begins to sense its coming shift, there's a letting go that starts to take place. Not forced, not dramatic, just a gentle loosening. Maybe your attachment to achievements begins to fade, the trophies gather dust, the accolades don't land the same way, or maybe the pull of material things, the house, the car, the endless upgrades, just doesn't hold the same shine. You might notice that you're more drawn to simple things, a quiet conversation, the warmth of sun on your face, the sound of birds in the early morning. Things you once overlooked become sacred. And the sacred things, they become essential. This detachment isn't cold. It's not about shutting people out or disengaging from life. It's about clearing space. When the soul prepares for what's next, it often begins by cleaning house, emotional house, spiritual house. The old ego drum and narratives start to fall away. The ones that told you you weren't enough unless you were busy, admired, or productive. And in that falling away, there's often a surprising feeling, peace. You might not be able to explain why you're no longer chasing the same dreams. You might feel a strange but beautiful acceptance rising in you, not passivity, but presence. You begin to see your life not as a set of accomplishments, but as a tapestry of connection, growth, and meaning. It's in this space that the soul begins its most honest work. The quiet release from the things that once anchored you to this world makes room for what lies beyond it. And while the mind may not understand it, the heart does. The heart always knows when the soul is stretching toward home. This detachment is not a failure of interest or effort. It is an invitation to turn inward, to reflect, to listen, to begin the sacred work of making peace with your life, your choices, and your story as you prepare, not to disappear, but to transform. It may seem surprising, even contradictory, but as death approaches, many people experience a strange and powerful sense of clarity. Not confusion, not chaos, but a deep, almost unshakable calm. It doesn't always happen, and it doesn't look the same for everyone, but when it does, it can feel like the soul pulling all its scattered pieces home for one last deep breath. This clarity isn't intellectual. It's not about suddenly understanding the meaning of the universe or finding all the right answers. It's quieter than that. It's more embodied. It's the kind of clarity that rises up when the noise of fear and distraction has finally fallen away. You stop fighting, not because you've lost, but because you've surrendered to something bigger, more timeless, more whole. People often describe this moment as a lifting of the fog, a softening. Things that once seemed complex and overwhelming become simple, not easy necessarily, but stripped down to their essence. Love, regret, forgiveness, beauty, the feel of a hand in yours, the sound of laughter from another room, the weight of your own breath, heavy and precious. You see your life more honestly. You remember what truly mattered. And sometimes in that moment, people smile, not with their mouth, but with their spirit. They know. We're so used to thinking of death as a moment of fear and pain, but what if we allowed space for the truth that sometimes it's also a moment of beauty, a moment when everything that's heavy falls away and only what's essential remains. This clarity, this peace is not an ending. It's the soul's way of whispering, I'm ready. And when you feel it, whether in yourself or in someone you love, don't explain it away. Sit with it. Honor it. That peace is not emptiness. It's presence. It's the threshold of eternity. When the soul begins to sense the nearness of its departure from the body, something shifts, not just in the body, but in the heart. What once felt buried, distant, or too painful to face starts to rise, and not with judgment or vengeance, but with clarity, with urgency, with grace. People often speak about having their life flash before their eyes, but it's not always a highlight reel of big accomplishments. More often, it's faces, conversations, moments of rupture or regret, a look you gave that wounded someone, a silence that grew into distance, a goodbye that was never said. And suddenly, those moments matter more than almost anything else, not because they define us, but because we long deeply and urgently to make them whole. This instinct to seek forgiveness is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the soul trying to return to alignment before it lets go. There's something inside us that knows we were not meant to carry bitterness to the other side, that knows love is our native language even when we've forgotten how to speak it. And forgiveness, whether you're giving it or asking for it, is rarely clean or comfortable. It doesn't always come with tidy resolutions or happy endings. Sometimes it means making a phone call after years of silence and simply saying, I wish I had done better. Sometimes it means looking someone in the eye and naming what you did, not to explain it away, but to own it. Sometimes the other person isn't willing to meet you there. Sometimes they've already passed on. But even then, there's still work the soul can do, because forgiveness isn't always a transaction, it's a release. Revisiting unresolved relationships also includes the one we have with ourselves. There comes a moment when you might find yourself replaying the story of your own life, noticing where you were too harsh, where you betrayed your own needs, where you abandoned parts of yourself just to survive. And just like with others, your soul may start urging you to make peace, not through denial, but through compassion. This isn't about rewriting the past. It's about reclaiming integrity before we leave. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means facing what is true and tending to it with love. And when this process begins, and when that urgency rises, you'll notice it's not about ego anymore. You don't care about winning the argument. You don't need to be right. You just want to be free. You want to leave with a lighter heart and fewer walls. If you feel this pull to call, to write, to speak, to cry, to say, I'm sorry or I forgive you, don't wait. That's not weakness. That's the soul doing its most sacred work. And if you're the one being asked for forgiveness, try to meet that courage with grace. Even if it doesn't heal everything, it honors the journey. It honors the humanity of both of you, because when all is said and done, what we carry into death is not our reputation, not our resume, not our pride, but the state of our hearts. And the soul longs more than anything to go home unburdened. Moments of deep stillness, where you feel both present and detached, may signal spiritual preparation. There are moments, often quiet, often unexpected, when everything slows down. Not just your schedule or your surroundings, but something inside of you. Your thoughts don't race the way they used to. Your emotions aren't pulling you in every direction. There's a kind of stillness that settles into your chest. You're awake, you're alert, but you're also different. These moments don't feel like sleep or numbness. They feel like pause, like being between heartbeats, between chapters. And in those moments, you might find yourself watching life unfold around you with a strange kind of clarity and softness. The world hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. You're present, fully aware of the people around you, the light through the window, the sound of your own breath, and yet part of you also feels slightly removed, as if you're observing it all from just one step back. This is not disconnection, it's preparation. Spiritual teachers across cultures have spoken about this double awareness, where the soul begins to hold two truths at once. I am here and I am almost gone. It's not morbid, it's not melancholic, it's sacred. The stillness that comes in these moments isn't about shutting down. It's about waking up to the fact that the life you've lived is making its final turn, not toward an end, but toward a return. For some people, the stillness feels like peace. For others, it may carry a little grief or quiet wonder. It's as if your soul is beginning to withdraw just enough to see the bigger picture. You might notice you're less reactive, less interested in things that used to pull you into drama or urgency. You're not in a rush anymore. The to-do list becomes background noise. Your energy shifts, not to escape life, but to touch something beyond it. And the beauty is, in this space, you begin to listen differently. You hear people not just for what they say, but for what they mean. You notice silence more. You become less afraid of it, because in that stillness, you're meeting the part of you that has always been eternal. The part of you that isn't afraid of death because it knows it isn't the end. This kind of stillness can happen weeks or even months before the body begins to shut down. It can come in waves. Sometimes you'll feel deeply rooted in this presence detachment. Other times life pulls you back into its chaos. That's okay. There's no perfect way to transition, no linear path to spiritual readiness. But when you do feel those moments, when time slows and you feel simultaneously held and released, let them be what they are. Don't rush to fill them. Don't panic. Don't analyze. Just be in them. Because those moments are sacred ground. They are a threshold space where the soul is not quite here and not quite there, where it's doing the deep internal work of surrender, not just to death, but to grace. And in that surrender, there is often more aliveness than we've ever known. Because when everything else falls away, what remains is presence. Pure, holy presence. The body whispers long before it screams. Chronic fatigue, fading appetite, and withdrawal are often signs. The body is wise. It always has been. Long before we recognize what's happening, the body begins to speak, not in dramatic declarations, but in whispers. It doesn't need to shout right away. It simply shifts, softens, slows. If we listen closely, we'll notice these signs. They're not about fear. They're not about failure. They're about preparation. One of the first whispers is fatigue, a kind of tiredness that rest doesn't fully relieve. This isn't the exhaustion that comes from a long week or a sleepless night. This is something deeper. It lives in the bones. It often feels like the soul asking the body to slow down, to conserve, to stop spending so much energy on the outer world and begin tending to the inner one. You may find yourself napping more, retreating from stimulation, or simply sitting in silence without needing to explain why. Another sign is a fading appetite, not just for food, but for consumption in general. The hunger that once kept you tethered to routine and desire begins to lessen. You're no longer chasing flavor, noise, or novelty the way you once did. Even the body's relationship to food becomes sacred, less about sustenance and more about simplicity. You may find yourself craving lighter meals or forgetting to eat at all. This isn't negligence, it's transition. The body is slowly beginning to release its hold on this world, and in doing so, it requires less and less from it. And then there's withdrawal. Not isolation out of despair, but solitude that feels instinctive. You may pull back from conversations that once felt necessary. Crowds might feel overwhelming. Small talk may lose its flavor. You might long for the company of just a few trusted souls, or sometimes just yourself. This isn't about shutting people out. It's about turning inward. The soul, preparing for its passage, often invites you into this quiet space where reflection, reconciliation, and presence can take root. For loved ones observing these shifts, it's important to remember withdrawal doesn't always mean sadness. Silence doesn't always mean suffering. Often, it's the body doing what it knows how to do. Protect, prepare, and preserve. It's not giving up, it's giving over. It's making space. Of course, not every physical symptom is a sign of dying, and we should never ignore medical care or mental health support. But when these signs come in a way that feels rooted, quiet, and persistent, when they show up alongside emotional and spiritual changes, it's worth listening. We live in a culture that tells us to push through, to override pain, to hustle. But the body isn't something to conquer, it's a sacred partner. And when it starts whispering through fatigue, appetite, withdrawal, it's inviting us to pause, to listen, to soften. Because those whispers are not just signs of death approaching, they're invitations to live the final stretch with intention, to slow down enough to make meaning, to stop long enough to say the words that matter, to leave this world the same way we entered it, slowly, gently, and wrapped in wisdom. If we strip away all the noise, all the rituals and traditions and doctrines, preparing your soul for what comes next isn't about being perfect. It's not about having memorized every sacred text or checking off a cosmic list of moral achievements. It's not about being fearless. It's about showing up raw, real, and ready with honesty, humility, and heart. Honesty begins with telling the truth about your life, not the polished version, not the story you crafted to survive, the truth, the mess and the beauty, the love you gave freely and the love you withheld, the ways you tried, the moments you failed, the places where you pretended and the places where you were brave enough to be real. Preparing your soul means letting those truths surface without flinching, not to condemn yourself, but to free yourself. When you speak the truth, even if it's just to your own soul, you clear a path, you create space for grace to meet you. Humility is not about shame, it's not shrinking or thinking less of yourself. Humility is standing in the fullness of who you are and saying, I am human. I've hurt and I've healed, I've fallen and I've risen. I've been afraid and I've found courage anyway. Humility is knowing you're not in control of the timeline, the outcome, or the mystery that lies ahead, and learning to be okay with that. Realizing that no amount of power or planning can buy you one more breath than what was already written. And instead of resisting that truth, you bow to it. Not out of defeat, but reverence. And then there is heart. Maybe the most important of all, because preparing your soul isn't an intellectual exercise. It's an emotional one. It's the quiet choice to stay soft in a world that tells you to harden. It's choosing to say the words, I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, goodbye. It's opening your hands and letting go of resentment, of control, of unfinished expectations. The heart prepares not by clinging, but by connecting. And those connections, whether with people, with yourself, or with something greater, become the soul's greatest companion.